Welcome to Real People, Real Voices with your host. I'm James Jackson.
I'm Pastor Wayne Moore.
We got a great show on today, Dr. Moore. I think the people are going to be very, very blessed talking about parenting.
Yes, it's a subject that needs to be revisited over and over and over again. And we have the right man here to help us with that.
Yeah, Dr. Nathaniel Turner.
Yeah.
Nathaniel Turner is going to be with us, and he has a book out called Raising Supa Man.
Supa Man.
It's spelled a little different.
Right.
Instead of super, Supa Man.
Supa Man, S-U-P-A-M-A-N.
Yeah.
Raising him.
And in his book, a lot of good stuff in there with how he raised his son. Just some real good information for those who are going to be watching, and how that you can parent your child's progress.
Right, and just because he gives us information how he raised his son does not mean that we cannot use that information.
Yeah, in fact, he talks about internal drive.
Right.
He talks about, one of the things I think is going to be interesting as we talk to him is he didn't talk to his son like a child.
Right.
He talked to him man to man.
Right.
It's going to be very interesting. And those of you who are in our viewing audience, we're glad that you joined us. I want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Real People, Real Voices, and you can share this show with family members and friends who may not live in the Indianapolis area. So I want you to stay tuned right here. But if you're in the Indianapolis area, you're blessed.
Yes, you can catch us.
You can catch us. You get to see it first.
Yeah.
So stay tuned right here at Studio 40, WHMB Channel 40. Pastor Moore and I will be back after this.
Hundreds of thousands of veterans have taken off their uniforms and put them away, carefully packed and safely stowed. But for some veterans, the uniform isn't so easily removed. The emotions experienced while serving continue to weigh on them. Life after service is different. Many veterans find transitioning difficult. Some feel overwhelmed and lost. But that uncertainty doesn't take away from their strength and courage, nor does it take away from the sense of duty veterans carry with them. The power of one person, one connection, one act of compassion can make a difference in the life of a veteran going through a difficult time. For free 24/7 confidential support, call the Veterans Crisis Line or visit veteranscrisisline.net.
Well, welcome back to Real People, Real Voices with your host, James Jackson.
Wayne Moore.
You know, Dr. Moore, I think this is going to be a great segment here as we're talking about parenting.
Right.
And the book you're holding, Nate Turner, Raising Supa Man.
Yeah, it's a collection of letters that he has written to his son, and he's going to share that with us today.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times when you start talking about parenting, most parents are told, or most parents don't treat their children like adults, if you will.
Right.
But Nate Turner, in his book, as I understand it, he'll kind of give us a better understanding. He didn't talk to his son as a child. He talked to him as a man.
Another level, totally another level. We're going to see how this works. We're going to see if it's going to be productive for us to share with the community as well.
All right. So, Nate, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
A great book. I'm reading it more than halfway through it. A lot of exciting information. I have a 3-year-old grandson,
Okay.
and I started feeling a little bit behind.
Well, it's never too late. There's a chapter in the book called that, so it's never too late.
Yeah.
You can start writing your grandson now.
Okay.
Tell us what put you in the mindset to create this type of parenting with your son?
So a couple things. So I'm originally from Gary, Indiana. And as I tell people, I'm lucky to be here, right? So I hold a few advanced degrees, and sometimes I'll run into people and they'll say, well, of course, Of course, you're successful. I'm like, well, but you don't know where I came from. I got here and I was lucky. So when my wife told me that we were expecting a child, I realized that luck is not a process for success. And so rather than hope that my son was lucky, I decided to build a process that would help him. So I didn't know I was having a boy. I knew I was having a child. And before my child was born, I had written Harvard and asked Harvard to send me an application. And I wanted an application so that I could then design a life template for my child to be able to meet the qualifications of a school like Harvard.
So just hold there for a minute.
Yeah, that's deep. Wait a minute. For you, so you discover your wife is pregnant.
Yes, sir.
And all of them immediately after you are joyous and happy about the pregnancy.
Scared out of my mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand.
He's not looking for a daycare.
No, he's looking for Harvard.
I'm looking for Harvard. Yes.
That's great. That's great. That's a high level to reach for while the baby's yet being developed in the womb.
Yeah, and you talked about a life template.
Yes, sir.
Expand on that.
So I believe that there are a number of things parents should do, and we try to get kids to navigate a world that is very complex, and we ask them to do that at some indiscriminate period of time, right? So when you get 14, oops, you should be a man. Well, really? If you get 16, oops, you should be acting like a man. And I think that that's sort of a faulty approach to take. I believe in backward designing. So you ask yourself where you want your child to be, and you design their life backwards. So in Life Template says there are certain books, there are certain places, there are certain things, there are certain videos, there are certain people, et cetera, that children should meet and know. I can call that the jack of all trade component. I believe that if you have a conversation with a young person and they can engage you in a number of different topics, you walk away saying, wow, I'm really impressed by that child. So those are the things I share with parents that kids should do. Secondly, I say that there are things that children should master, right? They must master reading, writing, math, and science, which hopefully we'll talk about that later. That most of our children that look like us are not mastering those subject matters. There may be other things we want children to master, behavior, chivalry, et cetera. And then finally, there are things that I call the core. And there are things that I believe, 2 or 3 things that if something were to happen to my son, I believe that everyone who knows him would say those same 2 or 3 things about him.
Right.
And so his name is Naeem Kahari Turner Bendelli. It is purposeful. Naeem means benevolent. Kahari means kingly. My last name, Turner, I don't know where it came from, but my family's obviously descendants of slaves. And Bendelli means born away from home. So his full name means he is a benevolent king despite being born from slavery and being born away from home.
Great, great.
So every day, his life, he understands that he has a process, he has something that he has to live up to or live towards.
So when we start talking about the life template, certainly it's one thing to plan it, and then it's another thing to actually see that or do it or see that plan unfold. Right. So talk to us about your son, and of course you wrote Harvard. Talk to us about how things have come about.
So here's what happened. When I got the application back from Harvard, Harvard says 3 primary things in the application. If you look on their website today, you'll see it. It says, obviously, we want students who achieve really well academically. It also says, secondly, we want children who care about something greater than themselves. And thirdly, we want students who are global citizens. So when you read that, right, so I said, well, he must be prepared academically. I got to do that. I need to make sure he cares about something greater than himself, which means I need to get him involved in the community, understand his relationship with the community, his responsibility to the community, and then finally, being a global citizen. So part of that is making sure he can speak more than one language. And today he speaks fluent Spanish, Portuguese, English, and he would frown upon me if I said some other languages, but I think he knows some other languages as well.
He just doesn't want you to.
But he doesn't want me to say it, right. But those 3 for sure. So again, backward design says, what will it take academically? If Harvard tells me what their SAT score or the ACT score is or their GPA is, then you know what, I just have to start working backwards. The unfortunate thing that many parents do, we wait until our children go to school and we ask someone else to educate. We do a lot of outsourcing. I don't believe in outsourcing, I insource. I am the case manager of my child's life. So I'm not wasting 0 to 4 doing nothing like most of the families do. From 0, I'm making sure my son is beginning to learn to read, beginning to learn math concepts, and so that's sort of how the life template is built.
And did you get any pushback from your son? I mean, that's, because this is like an accelerated program when you start talking about what most people do or don't do with regards to the education of their children. Education being one of the 7 societal mind molders.
Right.
Very, very big, starting at 0
Yes.
in utero, actually then having the child and making sure every step you're right there.
Well, I think when you're a child and you grow up in that household, that just seems normal. Hey, my parents want me to read, I read. Hey, I can read, and now I can read comic books, right? I can read Superman and Spider-Man and Batman. Hey, I can read Nickelodeon Jr. I can do that on my own. Like, I want to read Harry Potter. I get the Harry Potter book, and I can read the Harry Potter book. I'm 5 or 6. I read the Harry Potter novel, a 100-page novel. He reads it in a day and a half. That just becomes the norm. So what other people are doing doesn't really matter as much, because in his home and the people around him are people who are guiding him to believe that this is the norm, this is what's expected.
So Nate, what you're telling me is the structure.
Yes, sir.
The structure, which should be a structure that possibly should work kind of backwards. Mm-hmm. But if you start your child reading early,
Right.
as a parent,
Yes, sir.
not outsourcing that child
Right.
to other areas, but you start in the household as quickly as possible,
Correct.
then you'll see the development much quickly.
Right. I think so. If you take a look at what's going on globally, America has ACT says America's educational proficiency, college proficiency, is nationally at about 26%. So those 3/4 of American children are not college ready, meaning they can't pass the math, reading, writing, math, or science test. All 4 of them, they can't pass. African American children, 62% can pass 0. So if you knew that, right, then you know that whatever we're currently doing is not working. So
Well, let's put a pin right there.
Yes, sir.
Because I think it's very, very interesting what you're saying. We're going to take a break. And we want you to stay tuned right here on Real People, Real Voices. Very, very interesting information on making sure you're involved in your child's educational process. I think that's important.
Yes, we're going to learn how to raise Supa Man.
Yeah. We'll be back and tell you more about it after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices. Dr. Moore is holding the book, Raising Supa Man.
Yes, yes, a phenomenal book. Nate's done a great job at writing letters to his son, teaching us today how to create a backwards philosophy in raising our children, which sounds like a paradox, but it makes a lot of sense. This is a great read. You ought to get it. I think it's at Barnes & Nobles. You can get it off of Amazon.
Yeah.
We want to encourage parents to get this. It'll help them with their children. All of us, whether you realize or not, we need help in raising our children. By the way, as we talk about that, he also has the REV ideology, I believe it is. Could you explain that to us?
yeah, so one of the big things I'd like to do at some point is I want to build micro communities. And so essentially I want to re-engineer our village. I think that, for example, I was talking to one of your future guests. People who struggle financially are burdened with costs that we don't see people have in other countries. So if you and I were living in Africa, in a village in Africa, we would use solar technology or biogas or something else to reduce our cost of living. Currently in our communities where people are suffering most financially, we're still paying the traditional energy costs. And so that's part of what I mean by re-engineering village, so that homes are net zero, so that people can live essentially off the grid. One of the things my son hopes to do is build smart grid technologies. So we can hopefully build homes for people where we take them completely off the grid, eliminate that cost. And then to build communities that are centered around educational centers, around schools, so that parents are within a half-a-mile walk distance from the center of the school, so the communities be about 1 mile circular, but to essentially change the conversation, change the way we do things in our community.
And I think that defines the reason why you consider yourself a social engineer.
Yes, sir. Yes, I'm not an engineer. He's an engineer, but I do have some ideas about how to re-engineer what we do currently. I don't think what we're doing currently works. And again, if we were thinking about ourselves as an emerging market, we would treat our community much different.
Well, Nate, that was the philosophy in the 50s and the 60s.
Yes.
So you want to go back retroly?
I do. I think some of it is absolutely right. You look at the things that Booker T, and I can't remember his name, escapes me now, it'll come to me eventually, when they built the 5400 school, Rosenwald, Julius Rosenwald, in the late 1900s, early 20th century. They built 5,400 schools across the Southeast. They were one-room schools. They were energy efficient. They faced the sun each morning so that the sunlight came in the room, and not across the face of students, but at the back of their head so they could work all day. In the middle of the day, if you wanted to turn it into a community center, there was a movable wall. Now imagine that in the early 1900s, that you could then separate and have 2 rooms, or you could turn it into a community center. The chalkboards were movable, and the teacher, the schools were based off the number of teachers. So if it was a 1 or 2 room, a 1 or 2 teacher school, the teachers had a home right there on the property. There was also farms, et cetera, so we weren't talking about food deserts, which I find sort of an oxymoron, right? The people who fed America can't find food to eat, right? Something is wrong with that. So I think we need to re-engineer a lot of the things we do and build another village that actually works.
And you're well on your way to at least making sure that people are aware of that concept.
Right.
But I'm also sure that you're working on it.
I'm working on it.
And you talked about, off air, you talked about another book you're working on.
Yes, it's called Stop the Bus. And so for 31 days last October to November, I wrote editors regarding articles that they printed about education and things that were troubling to me. For example, South Bend lowered their academic requirement to a 1.5 GPA for freshmen, and I just what are we doing when we're doing that?
So not raising the bar, but
lowering the bar, so that because it was too tough and not enough male athletes could participate in athletics. And I just don't, again, I don't know what we're doing, so I decided I was going to write. And so every time I would see something that seemed sort of egregious, then I would write the editor. And so we took the collection of them and decided to publish them.
Yeah.
That's great.
And what's interesting about a lot of what you're doing is you're proactive.
Yes.
Not waiting on things to happen, but getting out in front of it and to some degree making something happen.
Right. So last year, a friend of mine asked me, she has a 3-year-old son, he's 4 now. She said, hey, Nate, I want to make my son Naeem 2.0. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm flattered, but and a couple of weeks later, she said, I'm serious. Are you going to help me? Well, long story short, we started backward design his life. So a child who wasn't reading is now reading. A child who couldn't do math is now doing simple math. A child who he's now swimming, he's playing golf, and he's learning Mandarin. Because we developed a template for his future. And rather than waiting for him to get to a school and for them to decide what was going to happen, we decided.
The idea that he just gave, Pastor Jackson, how would that idea shape up in our society today? Could we create an educational model to where kids could connect to the backward concept, create a school or something like that? Since we have all these schools that are coming up, how do you feel about that?
I think, as you answer that, yeah. I want to add to that because there's a lot of schools that are, or even the state of Indiana is advocating for the Montessori way of educating children, which goes away from what you're talking about.
Right.
I'm troubled by a lot of what I see in regards to schools, quite candidly. Be they charter, be they public, be they private, the results don't indicate success. And yet we continue.
That's the data, right?
That's the data, right? So when you hear that 95 out of every 100 black children who put on a cap and gown and walk across the stage do not meet the minimum requirements in reading, writing, math, and science. 95 out of every 100. Yet we keep building new schools. We keep giving people money for new schools. If you look at the proficiency levels from NAEP, the National Association for Educational Progress, you'll find the preponderance of kids, black, brown, and poor, don't meet the minimum levels. If you look at what happened with the Great Recession, since the Great Recession, 99% of all new jobs have gone to people with post-secondary education. And yet we keep having schools talk about getting kids career ready. Like, ready for what career when 99% of them are college related? So I'm real concerned about the messages that schools are sending, and I think schools are doing a disservice to the community. I won't say all, but a great number of schools are doing a disservice. I look at PISA. PISA is the Program for International Scholastic Assessment. Right? And I look at the PISA numbers, and as a nation, we're ranked 17th in reading, I believe 25th in math, and 28th in science. And so when you look at those numbers, and we keep looking at the wealth disparity in this country, the income disparity in this country, and then you find out that 99% of the jobs went to people with post-secondary education. And then to add this point, that 30 of the top universities were responsible for 53% of the endowments in this country.
Wow. You can't raise Supa Man that way.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job with it, and it's obvious with what you've done with your son. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we want you all to stay tuned right here to Real People, Real Voices. Dr. Moore and I are going to come back with the rundown. We'll be back after this.
We are back, and we are looking at a pretty lopsided matchup, Jim.
Well, that's putting it mildly, Ron. This newcomer has no idea what he's getting himself into.
Let's go to the action. The size difference alone is staggering.
Unbelievable, Ron. And this guy acts like he doesn't have a care in the world. What is he thinking?
Jim, this is one of those rare moments where I actually find myself at a loss for words.
Yeah, I can hardly bear to watch.
Every day, people tempt fate and die trespassing on railroad tracks. See tracks, think train.
Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices with your host, James Jackson.
Pastor Wayne Moore.
And we trust that you enjoyed that last segment with regard to parenting and education. Powerful, Raising Supa Man.
Well, I tell you, this is a great book. It's a great read. I think what he has to offer all of us today, we need to take it and try to apply it in some areas of our parenting. He offers a wealth of information, especially when he talked about the idea of backwards training and how he sees and how things have transpired in that particular approach to parenting. And
that's not something you really think about, Dr. Moore. I mean, most of us are trying to get things together for the baby shower.
To go forward.
Yeah, I mean, you know that.
Yeah,
people trying to get their kids on the registry at Toys R Us and all that sort of thing. But Dr. Turner, he's very modest, but Dr. Turner says, hey, get started as soon as you find out.
Yeah, I think what was so compelling about it, I think he wanted his son to finish high school at 14 years old. That's unheard of.
Which generally is about 18,
right.
17?
Yeah.
17, 18, somewhere around in there.
And he's doing well. I had an opportunity to meet him off a set, and he's doing extremely well. But he is what we call a role model for fatherhood.
Yeah.
Nate's doing a great job in getting information out to all who will partake of it, and that's good.
Yeah, and some of the things he talked about with regard to re-engineering society.
Yeah.
As a social engineer.
Very interesting approach about re-engineering society, and it really traces back to the mid-50s and 60s of how communities used to run and how they used to work. And I hear people saying we need to go back to those type of philosophies.
Yeah, and if we do that, and it's interesting, if we do those kinds of things, the answer sometimes is in our history.
Right, it's in our history. I think we can reduce the violence, we can reduce a lot of things in our community and enhance the consciousness towards education and other areas in our communities.
And raising some great children. So thank you for joining us on today. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you and your family will join us again right here on Real People, Real Voices. God bless you.
God bless you.